Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says that he's going to put his so-called, quote, skinny version of a stimulus bill to the Senate tomorrow, with Democrats already saying it's not even enough to start a negotiation. We welcome now Republican Senator from Indiana, Mike Braun. So, Senator, always a pleasure to have you with us. Let me ask you the most direct and blunt question. Do the Republicans want a stimulus bill before the election?
So I think if you targeted it and you took what we had left over from the CARES Act, several conservative senators have been getting together over the last couple of weeks to propose just that. We appreciated Leader McConnell seemed to accept a lot of our ideas, which would be see what is left over, unspent from the CARES Act, find the places that still are in need of attention, and obviously that probably isn't even $1 trillion. The Democrats from the get-go, when you were at 3 to 3.3 trillion, a lot of that a bargaining chip for liability protection. Of course, that's part of what is in this bill as well. I think it shows where you're going to get 51 Republican votes. You're going to lose many of the more conservative Republicans if you get a top line that approaches even $1 trillion. And the reason I say that is I traveled the state of Indiana over the last 3 to 4 weeks, 2 weeks in July. We are back on our feet. You've got hotels, you've got sports venues, entertainment venues that have been structurally hurt. Most of the business owners I talk to have been struggling to get people back to work. Our unemployment rate has fallen into the 7s. My home county, biggest manufacturing county per capita in the state of Indiana, is about ready to cross into the high 5s. So my old company that kids and a great young executive team run now, we are busy. So by and large, I think it's a difference between how blue states may have a need where they don't balance budgets, where they've got unfunded pensions, reflecting what Pelosi and Schumer want, and states that have rainy day funds, live within their means, that really want government to get out of the way other than a few critical spots.
There are the critical questions about state and local assistance, no doubt about it. But if you look at the economic numbers overall, clearly it has come back a ways. Nationally, I'm talking about now. But at the same time, it's slowing down. For example, the number of jobs added, they're going up, but they're going up a little less each month. It's going to take a while to get back. Right now, we have, what, something 11.5, 12 million people unemployed that were employed before the pandemic?
So, yes, you've got the fact that when you do a government shutdown to fight this formidable foe, COVID-19, I'm surprised that we've come back as quickly as we have, because the big difference is 08, 09, we had a sick economy. Here, it was the best economy that I can recall in the 37 years of having my own business pre-COVID. And I think that's reflected in how it wants to spring back. There are going to be places of demand destruction that I don't know how you'll get them back until you've got herd immunity and a vaccine, and those are the areas I mentioned. Airlines have been a question of how healthy are they. Every seat was filled on the United flight I took from Indy back to D.C. yesterday. Most flights prior to it, had some room or capacity. That's another good barometer of how I think across the board we're finding this economy that may need a little bit of specific targeted help, not the wish list the Democrats are asking for.
Well, as you said, Senator, basically taking some of the money left over from the CARES Act, maybe redirecting it, maybe loosening up a little bit on the restrictions, maybe adding a little bit more. But in essence, what I understand is you and some of your fellow Republicans are willing to say, if that's what we do, that's enough, and we'll take the risk of what happens to the economy between now and the election.
Well, I think the dynamic that will come into play then will be the parallel discussion going on with Mnuchin and Metals and the Democrats. And that probably is something that's still alive. I think every day we get closer to the election, it becomes more of a moot point. I think once we take this vote, and we'll probably not see one Democrat vote for it, then I think the dynamic switches back to between the White House and the Democrats, and we'll see what happens. I think you'll shave a lot of Republicans off that are fiscal conservatives just on the top line amount only, regardless of the content.
We have another issue, of course, before us, which is keeping the government up and going at the end of this month as you start the new fiscal year. As I understand it, there are reports, at least, that the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, has gotten together with Secretary Mnuchin to have a way to have a continuing resolution to basically keep the government going. Is that your commitment? Are you committed to keep the government up and running?
I actually am part of a group that wants to have a no government shutdown bill passed to where we stay, do the work that we haven't done in decades, where we come up with a budget and live with it. So in this case, I think it's silly to shut the government down. Republicans always get left holding the bag on that, explaining why. So in the nature of how this place works, we generally roll over for them, for the things they want. They do the same thing for defense. We've got to get some political will in this place, or David, this is going to be a repeat year after year, taking us closer and closer to where you completely exhaust the Medicare trust fund, or you have a debt crisis in terms of who's going to lend us money now that we're 25 to 26 trillion in debt. We're getting into uncharted territory. Sadly, I don't see this being solved until we're looking over the cliff of a crisis, and that's what I came here to try to avoid. I at least have the pleasure of speaking out about it.
So finally, Senator, let's take you back to your home state of Indiana and how it's doing on the COVID-19 crisis, because it seems like there was a spike up. It seems to be ameliorating somewhat now. At the same time, I looked, for example, at Purdue, and Purdue is saying we're going to cancel spring break. We're not going to be around until January at the earliest, and even in the spring, you don't have to come. So that would suggest at least some parts of Indiana are still struggling with this disease.
You know, I think each state has kind of got its own dynamic with the disease. I think the thing that is clear, especially since the healthcare system has shown, especially in places like Florida, what has occurred there where you get the most vulnerable population, and they've held the fatality rate to about 1/4 of what New York did. I think we've learned a lot about it. We've got therapeutics that are working. We've got a vaccine, I think, that is literally around the corner. And you now have discussion that herd immunity may need to be under 50%, not closer to 60 to 70. I think in general, even for Indiana, even in places that have got other characteristics that wouldn't be parallel to ours, we're finding a way to navigate through it. And I can say this unequivocally, we would not even be close to where we're at for therapeutics and a vaccine if we'd been stumbling around with a bureaucracy controlling the dynamic. The warp speed, the Shark Tank, that more entrepreneurial approach to a very, very challenging disease would not have worked through the stodgy, bureaucratic approach that most Democrats still believe in.
So the private worked where the public, you think, would not have?
No, not near as quickly.
Okay, thank you so much. As I say, it's always a pleasure to have you with us. That's Senator Mike Braun, Republican of Indiana.